G'day everybody, welcome to another Affinity Photo tutorial. This week we're going to do the Cyberpunk cop picture that you can see on the screen here. So as usual, let's get started. We're going to start off with this picture here of our alleyway, and we're just going to make a copy of it. So click on the background and Command J just to make a copy. We're going to start off in the develop persona. So clicking on the develop persona here, and on the white balance down here, we're going to bring the temperature into the blues and a little bit more into the magentas. I'm going to turn the clarity down a little bit and up the saturation and the vibrance. And then just come and click on develop. So let's have a look. That's where we started, and we've just made that a little bit more cyberpunky. So the next thing we're going to do is start adding some of our neon signs that we're going to add into this picture. So the first one is these two signs here, and you can see I've already cut them out from the background. So we're going to start off with this one. So we can just copy this, Command C, over to our alleyway, and right on top, Command V. Making sure on our move tool, we can move that. Going to place this sign right here. So I'm going to make the picture a little bit smaller with my Command minus, and then just move this up into place. Place it about there, looks pretty good. Going to use my perspective tool down here just to get that into a little bit more perspective. About there, looks pretty good. Hit apply, might move it down a little bit. About there. Okay, on each of these neon signs, we're going to add a layer effects down here on FX, and on this one I'm going to add an outer glow. Clicking on color here, I can use this little color picker to pick which color I want the glow to be. So I'm going to pick the green, make sure we click on that to activate it, then turn the radius up so we get that nice glow. The inner glow, I'm just going to leave as white. So clicking on inner glow and then just turn that radius up just to get a little bit of inner glow there as well, and click off that. The other sign I'm going to use is this one. So I'm coming back to this picture to clicking on this one, Command C. Again, right on top, Command V. And this one I'm going to make a little bit smaller and rotate it. I'm going to stick it right here up the top here. So maybe a little bit smaller. I'm going to place that one right here. And that looks good about there. So I'm just going to turn this sign off for a minute. I'm back to my background here. I'm just going to grab my rectangular marquee tool. Just going to make a copy just of this sort of circle sign here with a Command J. Get rid of the marching ants, Command D. Turn back on my sign, and then this copy that I've made, I'm just going to move on top so that sign looks like it's gone behind. But I'll just grab my erase tool here. Make my brush a little bit bigger with my right and left bracket keys, and just erase that part so we can just still see our circle sign, but just erase those little bits there. Looks like we've got our sign behind that circle now. So let's just move that up a little bit. Now for this circle, I'm going to grab my ellipse tool, make sure my fill is on red. So you can use the swatches or you can use the color here. Pick a nice red color, and then right in the middle of the circle here, I'm just going to make a circle onto my move tool and just put that right in the middle of that circle there. I just use my arrow keys to move over a tiny little bit, and then I'm going to add a live filter, a Gaussian blur. Just blur that red tiny little bit about there. That looks pretty good. And now we're ready to add our next neon sign, which is going to be this letter M here. So for this one, I'm going to use my flood select tool, with my tolerance set to about 15. And I'm going to make sure I've got add clicked on here. I'm just going to click on the really bright white parts. So just clicking on all of these really white, bright parts. Make sure we've got them all. So we've got all of those here now. So I'm just going to copy that, Command C, back over to my alleyway, and then again right on top of that red ellipse that we made, Command V. And now we can just resize that letter M and bring it up to this red sign here. I'm going to use my perspective tool again just to manipulate that a little bit into that sign there. And that looks pretty good. So I'm just going to hit apply. And then on that letter M, I'm going to add the layer effects and an outer glow. This one's just going to be white. We don't need to do anything with this one but white. So let's just make that glow. And that looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. So we can bring some other signs over now. So let's bring it over this one. Again, I've just cut it out of the picture. So I'm just going to copy it over, Command C, back to the alleyway. And I'm going to put this sign on this concrete block here. So again, right on top, Command V. This one, I'm going to change the blend mode to screen, clicking on my perspective tool here. And I'm going to just manipulate this onto the wall here. Hit apply when you're happy. And again, I'm going to add that FX. Let's move this out the way so we can see it. The outer glow, clicking on color here. I'm going to pick the pinky color. So the pink, activate that color and turn up the radius. So we've got that pinky color glow. The inner glow, we'll just do the white. There we go. So we've got that neon sign set up. So I've got a couple more signs to go. So I'm going to add those. So there we go. We've got all of our neon signs set up for this picture that we're going to use. And then right on top, what I'm going to do is just add a new pixel layer. I'm going to change the blend mode to overlay. And I'm going to grab a brush. So let's click on my brush with a soft brush. And my flow, I think I'm going to have about 60%. And I'm going to pick some colors. So I'm going to use my color picker up here now. Click on this red color and activate it. And now with my brush, let's make my brush bigger. And I'm just going to paint some red where I think this red will sort of fall into the alley on the road here. We'll have some red up here and on the sides here. I'm going to do the same with maybe some of the orange from this sign. Activate it. And maybe some of the green from this sign over here. Activate that. Some of the yellow from this sign. I'm doing this quite quickly, so you can take a little bit more time. So activate that yellow. I think we'd have some up here, some up here. And maybe some of this pink just on the walls and down here. Okay, so just adding that. That looks pretty good. So that is our alleyway all set up. So I'm going to just now click on the top one here, click on my last neon sign here, holding shift down and group those and call that neon signs. So we've got our alleyway all set. So now we can move on to creating our cyber cop. So the picture I'm going to use for my cyber cop, I'm going to start off with this picture here. And again, if I turn off the background, you can see I've already cut the man out of the background using my selection brush tool. And I've already cut out a second selection, which is just the hand and the gun. So I've just got these two selections on different layers. If you do want me to show you how I did all the selections, leave me a comment below and I can do a separate video on just doing the selections if you like. So the first thing I'm going to do is add the robot. So I've got my picture of the robot here, and you can see I've already cut the part out of the background using my selection brush tool that I want and put that on a separate layer. So I'm just going to copy that now with a Command C, bring it over to the man with the gun here, and I'm going to put that right in between the gun and the man. So I'm going to click on the man here and Command V. Coming over to my move tool, I'm just going to move that into place and turn it and make it a bit bigger. So about there looks pretty good. Let's just drop the opacity so we can see what we're doing. Might bring that in a little bit. That looks pretty good. We'll bring the opacity back up a little bit. And now I'm just going to add a mask onto our robot here. So I've got my mask, clicking on my brush. Again, I know I've got a nice soft brush already, so that's fine. We're going to have the flow maybe about 30%. And I'm going to make sure I'm on black. And I'm just going to take away the parts that I don't need now. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in with my Command plus right in, making my brush smaller because I just want to go around where this shirt is. Brush a little bit bigger. And just keep resizing your brush till we can get these bits that we want. Remember, if you make a mistake or you just go over a little bit, we can make our brush a bit smaller, hit X on our keyboard to change over to white, and we can just refine that a little bit. Okay, let's click on the robot and turn that opacity all the way up now, and then we can just, making sure we're still on white, just refine those bits a little bit more. Okay, Command 0, and we've got our robot in place here. You can still see some of the head of our man behind, so we can click on that layer of our man, grab our erase brush tool, making our brush a little bit bigger and get rid of those bits that we don't want to see. Okay, with our gun layer here, we want the hand, just the hand, to be the same color as the robot. So what I'm going to do is add a new pixel layer up the top here, grab my color picker from up here and just pick the color of the robot and activate it. Using my flood fill tool here, I'm just going to click and fill that whole pixel layer with that color and then clip it just to the gun and hand layer. Going to change the blend mode to color. You can see we still got some of the hand from the man underneath. So I'm just going to click on that man again, grab my erase brush tool and just get rid of that brown color underneath. A little bit down here as well. And there we go. So I'm pretty happy with that. So got part of our robot all in place. Can still see some of that white shirt on here. So I'm going to just grab my colors back to black on my paintbrush and just get rid of that. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is add our hat onto our robot here. So this is the hat that I want to use for my robot. So I've already cut the hat out using my selection brush tool here. I'm going to turn off the background, make sure I'm just clicking on that hat. I've put it on its own layer, so Command C. Come over to where I've got my robot, and right on top of the robot layer here, Command V. Grabbing my move tool, just going to make that smaller, rotating the hat around, and then let's just size it to fit onto our robot here. So that looks pretty good about there. Going to use my mesh warp tool down here, and then I'm just going to manipulate that into place a little bit better. And that looks pretty good. And hit apply. Let's zoom in a little bit with our Command plus. And on the hat, let's add a mask. On the mask layer, we'll grab our brush. 30% is still good. We're painting in black. Make our brush a lot smaller. And let's just fix some of that up. A little bit smaller again. And let's just see if we can get some of that ear back in there. Might zoom in on that. Change my brush back over to white and just paint those bits back in there. Just moving between black and white just to get a better selection there. So once we're happy with our hat, we can now bring over our coat. So I've got this picture of the coat here. You can see this is where we started. I've used my selection brush tool up here just to copy just the coat and put it on a new layer. So I've ended up with this selection here. So I'm going to copy that, Command C, over to our picture. I'm going to paste it above the robot head here. So Command V, bring our coat in. Make it smaller. And I want this collar to be just under the ear here. So maybe a little bit smaller. And let's just place that so it's sort of about there. What we're going to do is use our mesh warp tool again, just to get this into perspective there. Bring that right down. Whoops. Bring that across, right under that ear. And that looks pretty good. So I'm going to hit apply on that. And we're going to add a mask. So the mask here, so I'm clicking on the mask, grabbing my brush, still 30%, still painting in black. And I'm going to zoom in again. So we can get rid of this part of the collar here. We don't need that. So let's just get rid of that. You can see we've got a little gap under here. So let's zoom in, make our brush smaller, go back to white, hitting X on our keyboard, and we'll just paint that section back in. Back to black, maybe take a little bit off there, a little bit too much. So let's zoom out, that looks pretty good. Let's zoom in on the other ear now, back to black, and let's just take some away there. And then a lot smaller brush, back to the white, and let's just get that in around there. Okay, Command 0. You can take a lot more time than what I've done here. So now we've got our copper with his coat and his hat. So on that coat layer while I'm here, I'm going to add a exposure, clip it to the coat layer, and I'm going to darken that coat down quite a bit, about like that. That's pretty good. Also, while I'm here, right on top of this robot head layer, I'm going to add a new pixel layer, and I'm going to change the blend mode to overlay, and I'm going to just clip it to that robot head. I'm going to call this eyes because I want to enhance the eyes a little bit. So I'm going to zoom in all the way into the eyes. I'm going to pick a really nice blue, darker blue. And with my brush, I think I'll bring my flow up to about 60%. On that pixel layer, on overlay, on blue, I'm just going to add a little bit more blue into the eyes here. Going to pick another light blue color and make my brush a lot smaller and just enhance that color a little bit more here. Same on this one. Changing to white, just enhance those little catch lights a bit more. Changing to black, smaller brush, and I'm just going to paint in a bit stronger on those black areas. Same on this eye. Zooming out, Command 0, just to enhance those eyes a little bit. That looks a little bit better. So I've got our copper all ready to go, or our cyber policeman all ready to go. So I'm going to highlight all of these now, holding my shift key down and then Command G, and I'm going to call this our Robo Cop. So we've got our policeman all ready to go. So we can now copy this, the whole group, over to our alleyway. So let's go Command C. All the way over to our alleyway. Right on top of this layer, Command V, we've got our Robocop in place. Come over to our Move tool and let's move him sort of in the middle here. Looks pretty good. Resize him if you want. Might have him about there. Looks pretty good. Okay, on that Robocop group, the whole group, I'll add an exposure. Just clip it to that group and just bring that down a little bit. That looks pretty good. Okay, so now we're going to start adding our highlights. So we're going to use some of the colors and add some highlights to our cyber cop. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start off with the hat first. So right on top of the hat layer, I'm going to add a new pixel layer. I'm going to change the blend mode to overlay, and I'm going to call this hat highlights and clip that just to the hat layer. So I've got this hat highlight here, grabbing my paintbrush, 60% is okay. We've got that on overlay. I'm going to pick this red color because I think some of the red would be coming onto his hat here. Going to make my brush fairly big. And as I get closer to the hat, you can see that red color coming in as I get closer, but I just want the highlights. So I'm just going to go to the hat till I see that coming red and just add some highlights there, just on the edge of that hat. Just like that, that looks pretty good. We'd have some yellow ones on this side. So let's change that color to a yellow. Make sure we activate that yellow. Let's just bring it in just until we see that yellow. See how we can just see it now? And let's just add those highlights just to that hat. A little bit on top there. That looks pretty good. Might make our brush really quite small. We might have some just on the edge here. It's like that. Looks pretty good. Maybe swap to the red and just do some on that red there. Let's do the same to our hand layer here. So right on top, new pixel layer, change it to overlay. Let's call this hand highlights and clip that just to this layer of the gun and the hand. I reckon we'll just activate this yellow again from here. We'll use this yellow color, making my brush bigger again. Again, when I bring this down, you'll see that that yellow color comes in. So I'm just going to get it right on the edge. Just for our highlights there, and some just around the gun here as well. Okay, so we've got that in place. Let's do the same for our coat layer here. Add a new pixel layer. Let's call it coat highlights. Change the blend mode to overlay and clip it just to the coat. So now I've got the coat highlight layer here. Might have some of the red, so we'll grab that red again with our color picker, activate it. We might have some of the red just coming down here, and then some of this purple maybe just down the side of our coat and a little bit down the side there. And let's do the same just on our RoboCop, the head of our RoboCop here. Add a new pixel layer. Let's call that head highlight. Again, change it to overlay and clip it to our robot here. Again, we might use this purple. For this one, I'm going to drop the flow down a little bit, maybe to 40%. And again, if we come close, you can see that that color will activate when we get a little bit closer. So we just want the edge again, maybe a little bit of purple down the side of his face there. There we go, everybody. That is the picture of my cyberpunk cop with the highlights and all the neon signs. As usual, you know what I'm going to do now. I'm going to click on the top layer, hold shift, click on the bottom layer, come up to layers and merge visible. And I'm going to come over here to my tone mapping because I just love what this tone mapping does, adding all that extra detail. So I'm going to click on dramatic, bringing the tone compression down to 20, dropping the exposure a little bit darker, and bringing the contrast down tiny little bit, and clicking on apply. So there you go, everybody. That is my tutorial this week on my cyberpunk cop. If you have enjoyed the tutorial, please give me a thumbs up. Please consider subscribing to my channel and hitting that notification bell so you know when my next tutorial is coming out. But until next time, I'm going to say to you, stay well, stay safe, and I'll see you in my next video.